Hello and welcome to the RevOps Show. This episode, Doug and Jess are getting into the 3 core pipelines of any business and what you're trying to solve with each pipeline. This episode is more about why there are 3 pipelines and 3 value chains that should be a part of every business, what those are, and their objectives. So there's a lot to digest here and a lot of takeaways. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Jess.
Oh, Doug's sad.
Say it ain't so.
It is so.
You're abandoning me.
I'm abandoning you. I'm going on vacation. God forbid. In your moment of need? When are you not needy?
Whoa. I said in my moment of need. I didn't say needy.
Right, and I asked you when you're not needy.
See, I don't understand this need for vacation because isn't working with me like experiencing an infinite vacation?
It's like experience an infinite something. I don't know if vacation's the word that I would use to describe it.
Wow. So anyhow, though, I got to tell you, though, Jess, I'm impressed because you scheduled this. The stakes are high. This is the last thing you're doing, at least officially.
Right.
Like it's the RevOps show and vacation. So basically, if this show goes well, good vacation. If this show's off, uncertain vacation.
Uncertain vacation. I think I'll still manage to have a good vacation. No offense.
Sorry, I'm seeing if we can get. I'm assuming you heard her.
Yeah, I can hear her. Yeah.
I don't know, Jess. If you don't nail this episode, when you're in the cabana at Hurricane Alley, are you going to be able to let it go?
Great.
Are you going to be able to?
Let it go.
The real question is, what am I going to do a week without having to listen to your soundboard? That's the real question.
Bam!
That is the real question. You're going to miss it, Jess. You're going to miss it. By the way, offsite, what did people request it? What was the request that we do?
Music trivia. You play from your soundboard.
Why? Because you see how it's become. See how it now means something. Can you imagine if we started an all hands meeting and I didn't have music playing?
Here's my concern about this. How much time are you going to spend trying to find the perfect songs for this?
I'm confused. Is it that I find the perfect song, or is it that if I choose it, it's the perfect song?
Oh my God.
Like, which is the cause? Is it like, am I finding it or is it finding me?
I don't like to focus on the results.
It's about the process. No, so this is a great opportunity for anybody that's considering working with us for the next week. The promise door is wide open. Reach out.
Yeah, no. Doug's not allowed to talk to clients for the next 7 days. It's not.
No, I'm saying prospects.
Happening.
I'm saying prospects. We can get the prospects.
Them either. No, you're not allowed to talk to. You know what? I think you're right. I think you need to take a vacation while I take a vacation. I am now nervous officially.
You know, I could do one other thing.
What's that?
There's a lot of interesting stuff about developments in the project management application space.
No, we're not doing that either. Doug likes to joke about changing our project management tool while I'm on vacation because he thinks it's funny. It's not. It's not funny.
Wasn't there a time that it was true though, that like that's what we did?
It was true. And the good news is I know that so much is built into the current tool that we use that there's no way that you could change it in a week. So yeah.
Oh, I don't think we have it fully replicated in a week. I think we just have it changed.
Sweet, go for it. Have at it. I want you to announce it tomorrow so you can deal with all the blind panic.
Should I take a look at some of what they're sharing just for like inspiration? Like how might we apply this to what we're doing?
What are you talking about? You
Just
lost
take a look
me.
at what the different project
Oh,
management applications are,
no.
and like watch what they're doing
No.
just for inspiration.
I like all this unlimited time that you have while I'm on vacation.
Well, I'm
You're
not
gonna
allowed
be
to talk to
selecting songs.
clients. I'm not allowed to
You
talk
are
to
not allowed
prospects.
to. No.
I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to talk to the team.
Yeah, that was inferred. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I figured it frees up time for me to do these things.
Accurate.
All right,
Okay.
Jess, what are we talking about today?
Today we are going to talk about the 3 core sales pipelines.
We're not going to talk about the 4 questions. Today is unlike any other day.
No,
It's not Passover.
it's not Passover. No.
Okay.
Took me a minute on the 4 questions, but I got there just before you said it.
Yep.
All right, Doug.
By the way, did you see the National League ended a 10-year losing streak? Beat the AL All-Stars.
I did not see that.
Yep. Alrighty. So what are we talking about?
3 core
3
pipelines. Yep. So let's start with what's the problem that we're trying to solve with sales pipeline.
So it's not so much, because we recently did an episode on pipelines, and so I want to be clear. This is really not. This episode is more about why there are 3 pipelines, 3 value chains, customer acquisition, revenue acquisition, value chains that should be a part of every business. So it's more about what's the structural problem from a go-to-market standpoint in terms of managing the functions that are represented in pipelines, right? So if you have questions about sales pipelines, I forget, we'll put in the show notes a link to that episode. So, for those of you that have listened to the show, you already know that I go way back on CRM. Jess, you remember my first CRM? Not counting the index cards.
Oh, well, it was ACT for DOS, I believe.
ACT for DOS. Disk Operating System. Yep, is ACT for DOS, not even Windows. And so it was really only several years ago that the idea of multiple pipelines in a CRM was really even a thing. One of the things that happens when you don't, and this is why process and methodology is so important. When you don't have process or methodology, we fall to the middle. And the way that sales organizations, the way that growth organizations approach sales, if they don't clearly mark the lines and clearly define milestones and elements, you basically have a whole bunch of opportunities that are sitting in here. And the way that we manage pipelines is theoretically how far chronologically into the process are they? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So it tends to be very activity driven, linear process, which by the way is a really funny thing as we look at all the illustrations and data and everything that shows how the buyer's journey is in fact not a linear, predictive, step by step. It is a pinball machine. It is a all of the place type experience. And so what ends up happening is we have sales opportunities. So we have leads, we have opportunities, we have customers. And the net of this is we tend to treat all leads the same. And I realize that we have segmentation and there might be we might adjust messaging, but our approach is the same. A deal becomes a deal. And again, unless there's a clear methodology, put a deal in a salesperson's pipeline. By the way, what does a salesperson get yelled at most often? Not enough deals in the pipeline. What is back to being a metric that people worship? It sounds so good. Pipeline coverage. What's our coverage? Right, which is basically the multiple of your number that you want to hit. So we have all these disincentives, or I should say, misincentives. They're bad incentives to inflate our pipelines, right? And so to put more in, and if you think about it, Jess, here's my quiz question for you: what's the scarcest resource to a sales rep? I mean, if we wanted to get a little bit deeper, we could say energy, right? So they actually have less time than the time that they have, right?
Right.
And and actually, if you think about it from a time energy perspective, what's one of the things that kills energy? Being in the wrong place at the wrong time, taking the wrong action.
Yep.
doing the wrong things. So we put these deals in, and we don't have, we haven't built strong process and structure. And by the way, if you build strong process and structure, you're going to find that the byproduct of this, the objective is not to have 3 pipelines. The byproduct is 3 pipelines emerge.
Right.
Is they're in there, and again, unless we manage against it, we're going against gravity. Unless you manage against gravity, if you're in a customer acquisition role, it's the natural mindset is Ricky Bobby. You're Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
Right.
You ain't first, you last.
Want to go fast, and if you're not first, you're last. If you don't win, you lose.
Right? Yep.
And again, I've talked about playing poker. That's a philosophy I see a lot of people. The moment they play a hand, if you don't win, you lose. Except, as you learn in poker, sometimes you have to lose to win. We'll cover that in another episode. So the trouble is they're all in one place, or they're in arbitrary pipelines. So they're grouped, but they're not really grouped according to the structure and the motion that's being managed. And so we default to treating everything the same. And if we don't treat everything the same, then we are putting the rep in the position to have to think about it. So now I'm having to think and bring my own structure and process to play. And so I actually eat up a lot of my energy just in thinking about how am I handling this. And so what I see far too often, and you see this especially as businesses grow, as sales teams grow larger, is there's a sprint to the average. And then what ends up happening is the average norms down over time. So you're always, and that's another element of going against gravity. Part of the reason for that is as that pipeline comes and you start managing more different in there, you end up playing either to find the thread that has the most in common, which again, you're treating everything the same, which leads to a lowest common denominator. And then further, your analytics, you cannot get a signal. Your signal to noise ratio blows up. And what ends up happening is the signal you get is noise. And what I mean by that is far, far more often than not, the signal that you're picking up is actually a bad signal. And that gets into what we talked about, I think it was in the last episode, where as we're getting better and better at the thing that we're doing, we're becoming weaker and weaker. And a lot of that is because the analytics that we're picking up are what's happening is the signal that we're getting it's a concurrent signal. So it's proximate. Those actions that are closest to the last step get a louder signal. So we keep optimizing to that. And what ends up happening is we spend more time and we get less for the effort. That's the structural.
Yep. So you talked a little bit about this, but you hit on some points that I think are gonna attach. But so why multiple pipelines?
Well, let's talk about the problem for the reps.
Okay. All right.
Right. So, and it's funny because one of the things that I hear often is our reps won't like it. Our reps aren't used to it. Our reps will get confused. And I understand why people say that, but it's actually the reverse that is true. So, we talk a lot about friction, but the friction that is missed, it's an invisible friction. It's an invisible weight, is every time that a rep has to stop and think, right? Every time a rep has to stop and think, where the thinking is not about the interaction that they're going to have, especially in their execution mode, that is a major piece of friction. Another piece of friction is mind shifting. So I'm having to think this, then I'm having to think that. I'm having this conversation, then I'm having that conversation, then I'm doing this, as opposed to letting the system sort it out so that everything is queued up for the rep. And, I know what play I'm running. I know what path I'm taking that really drives that. And that's what building the genius into the system means. So why multiple pipelines? If the goal, why have pipelines to begin with? Like, let's talk about why pipelines. Pipelines are what we're bringing is a theory called constraint theory. So if we chalk the lines, we narrow the span. It's like putting the harness on the horse, right? If you have the harness, if you don't have the harness on the horse, there, lots of power all over the place. The reason, if you want to win the race, you narrow the focus, pull the energy into those constraints, you drive greater velocity, right? And so that's why we do pipeline, right? Is so that it is a value creation process. It is a value accretive, value creation chain, whatever you want to call it, for whatever reason. My business process dictionary doesn't seem to be online right now. And so the way to think about it is every motion, what is the underlying motion at play? That should be a pipe, right? What's the job that we're doing here? That should be the pipe. What's the objective? When there are distinctly different objectives, when you're playing different games, when you've got different rhythms. So I would not put a jazz band and a punk band and a country band together to play at the same time. Hey, we've got our rock and roll festival. We got a little gospel, a little punk, a little progressive, a little classic, all being played intermittently. And by the way, someone's going to say, well, there's this, whatever I go to. And the thing that makes it great is, well, here's what I know. The band that plays their set, then a different band plays. They're not randomly going between jazz and rock and this and that, right? So a pipeline is a motion, it's a play. And then by isolating those into there, and this is where when I see people taking multiple pipelines, I see them do things like the Boston region and the Atlanta region and this region.
Yep.
And it's all the same motion and it's in different pipelines. Or it's,
different lines of
widget
business.
A is a pipeline. Widget A is a pipeline.
Yeah.
Widget B is a pipeline. Widget C is a pipeline. Like that is losing the signal, like breaking it up, you're fragmenting, right?
Yep.
The power of single pipeline is the ability to really fine tune your analytics, your insights, so you can close the loop and make better decisions to optimize the allocation and expenditure of your resources towards the achievement of objectives.
That makes sense. So what are the 3 pipelines?
So 2 of the pipelines are what we think of as traditionally sales pipelines. So they're 2 different sales approach. They're 2 different sales motions. So from a simple, I just call them, transaction and strategic.
Okay.
And then the third pipeline is really a pre-sales pipeline, which we refer to as the development pipeline. So a transaction pipeline, a strategic pipeline, and a development pipeline. And I probably should have said a development pipeline, a transaction pipeline, and a strategic pipeline, because the development pipeline occurs
pre-sale. Before. Yeah. Yep.
And so the transaction pipeline and strategic pipeline. And by the way, think about this. And how many databases do we see this is the case? If it's even this good. We have contacts. We have contacts in companies that we've defined as leads, which is different than a leads object, right? We've got contacts in companies that we've defined as prospects. Mm-hmm. I've got 100 salespeople. How many prospects? And by the way, a customer for buying, like if you're in a reselling market, your customer is also a prospect. Got 100 salespeople. How many prospects do you have? And again, prospects would include customers.
You said out of 100?
Yeah, you have 100 salespeople. How many prospects do you have?
100
salespeople. A lot. Yeah. I mean, thousands. Tens of thousands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You might not be working them all, but you've got
right
tens of thousands of prospects. Then we have deals opportunities. How many deals opportunities do we have? 1,000, 2,000?
Thousands. Yeah.
I mean, some of them have 10,000. But if you have 10,000, I'm pretty sure you've got 100,000. Or I've seen some pipelines, they have 10, they manage 10,000 opportunities, 5% are won. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. So if I have 100,000 to 10,000, I can't optimize that. I can't experiment on that. I can't run on that. Right. And so when we talk about the development pipeline, a large part of what we're trying to do 2 things with the development pipeline. Right. And by the way, you should have a development pipeline, whether or not you have a dedicated development function. Sales development, business development, market development, whatever you want to call it. If your salespeople are full funnel people, you should have a development pipeline or full cycle, right? Why? Because there's a development function, right? There's a different objective and purpose, right? The development pipeline is the middle. Why do we get into RevOps?
Because in the messy middle.
Because the middle's right.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting is when you look at this whole customer acquisition thing, it's bizarre because you've got like marketing automation today is amazing. So managing first contact, it's amazing. I mean, like the complaint now is you can't respond in 5 minutes. Right? Like, I don't know if that's the complaint. That's probably a pretty good complaint. By the way, for what it's worth, I'm grateful that not everyone's replying in 5 minutes. Because honestly, when I'm, when I submit that lead on the project management website next week, it's not so important that I need you to get back to me in 5 minutes, really. Sorry. It is, again, it's so like, and by the way, the last elements, they can be managed because the salesperson's there. The part that's complicated and where the leverage is, where the lift is, it's in the middle. Because the middle is the place where intent happens. And if you want to lower your cost of acquisition, if you want to really scale growth, you're going to generate relevance pre-intent. And if you can't win the pre-intent game, if you can't get better at the pre-intent game, your cost of growth is going to increase. There's not much you can do about it, right? And so the process of getting from that quote unquote lead status to full defined opportunity status, there's multiple steps there that require. It's the same underlying way that you would optimize how you're optimizing your pipeline. You need to break it out. So what a development pipeline does is and for reps is it pulls out the people instead of me having to go into my database to look at who are the people that I should call and follow up based on it. It lets me see it. It lets me manage it visually, and it makes it very easy to see what am I doing, how am I doing, where am I doing, how can we get better at it. Right. So the development pipeline is really all about identifying what causes sales and causing that to happen. And by the way, you will see two different types of organizations, right? There's a lot of business where the relevant place to be, where you need to have your resources, your primary resources post-intent, right? Those are relatively early stage markets that are moving past mainstream. So tremendous amount of demand, right? And there's a phase in a lot of markets where the demand is strong, and to win the game, to win in the market, you need to be really good at capturing the demand. Now, if you're not there where the demand is being created or where the intent is coming in, then you're going to be in a much weaker position to capture it. So that's why you still want to be there. But you might that might be your early resources. That might be your scouts or whatever, right? Now, what happens, Jeffrey Moore at its most intense, Jeffrey Moore refers to that as a tornado market, right? What happens is as a market matures, that tailwind, it's like what that massive increase in demand does. And the massive increase is because it's getting into the mainstream market. You're moving to the center of the bell curve. What that does is it creates the equivalent of this huge tailwind, right? But that tailwind is only going to exist for a finite period of time, right? And by the way, it always ends at a point in time where you're pretty certain it's not going to end, right? Like you don't get this big warning of adjustment.
No.
So if you're not there, like if you're not having those capabilities, that's where you see this real big growth. And by the way, two things will happen. What you might find is that your market demand, like that's no longer skyrocketing, it's leveling off. The market's matured. Right? Think marketing automation. By the way, if you think about for tech and SaaS companies, we are not in a lower demand environment than we were 2 years ago. We're in a not as massive an increase of demand. What's happened is the demand has gone from explicit to latent, The demand's still there. It just needs to be dug. You got to dig to get to it.
Right.
Right. So the fish have gone down towards the lower end of the sea. That's where that development process is so important. And how do you play? How good, how strong are you there? It's going to have a major element on how you allocate your resources. And I'm sorry, the point that I was making is sometimes I need my best people at the end.
Right.
Right. I need my best, most knowledgeable people to be there when demand is there, because that is a high growth market. But what's crazy is when the market becomes big, it's no longer a high growth market. Right?
Yep.
Because it's a big market now. And like, it's too big to be a high growth market. Right. And by the way, a 1% increase in demand or a 1% increase in the market size when you're a big market is oftentimes what was 1,000% increase earlier in the cycle. Right. So again, you're in these different plays. And so that's where that development pipeline, if you can't develop business, then you don't have as much control of your future as you think you do. And by the way, in those more difficult markets, now suddenly it's the generating intent or what's happening right at that intent generation that becomes particularly important. Or you're now dealing with larger organizations. Right. By the way, I talked about the market. You might also find that I've now grown. Like this is an adjustment that we've had to make. We've grown to a larger market and we're dealing with more competitive. Like we used to be in the up part of the market with a bunch of small players that couldn't handle it. Now we're beginning to enter some of the smaller parts of the market where there are some very strong competitors, and we have to be able to adjust to that. And being able to manage that element, that's what the development pipeline is. So it's by the way, if you don't have a development pipeline, because I've had people say to me, well, Doug, all you're really doing is taking stages that I could have in my sales pipeline and putting them in a different pipeline.
Right.
And I go, yeah. That's exactly what I'm doing. Well, why am I doing that? Well, again, I want to be able to see how am I doing. I want to be able to get a real clear picture. I want the system to do the thinking for my team. I don't want to have to do all the thinking for my team. I want to be able to see, like, how excited are you that this sale took 450 days when your friends and neighbors are closing deals in 60 to 90 days?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what you find is that, oftentimes that long period of time, and by the way, is it a 400 or 500 day sale? What's happening and the plays that you're running before someone is what we'll call opportunity qualified versus after, they're very different.
Right.
And so by segmenting that and separating that, you build that constraint, you build that structure, and you'll drive better behavior, better performance.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about the two sales pipelines, transaction and strategic. So what's the purpose of the transaction pipeline?
So here, both pipelines have the same purpose. You're now managing your active sales process.
Okay.
Right. So these are our active sales processes. There's a value component.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, like, value is in the eye of the beholder, which means value is in the eye of the buyer. The customer defines the value, and buyers fall into one of two categories for how they perceive value. And by the way, this is not like the two are fundamental value and total value. Now, Jess, you're not one or the other. You're one or the other in different situations. So there are some places and some things where you would be fundamental value. There are other places where you would be total value.
Right.
Fundamental value means that the value is in whatever's being bought. And there's two reasons that someone's going to perceive is going to be in a fundamental value segment. One is they have the knowledge, they have the expertise.
Mm-hmm.
I should say they have the required or necessary knowledge and expertise.
Okay.
Right. So if I were buying bleach, that would be a fundamental value purchase. And the reason is it is actually really a commodity. Bleach is federally mandated. Like, it has to have this chemical makeup to be bleach. If it's a different It's kind of like champagne, Jess. Unless it comes from the Champagne region, everything else is sparkling wine. So, like, and by the way, this goes back to our episode for our RFPs, right? RFPs were built for these, the specifications were very clear. You meet the specifications or you don't meet the specifications. But in some cases, like I have the expertise. So,
Right.
it was really popular for a while that, enterprise tech salespeople are going out, and you'd hear the story of the chief product officer talking about the major multi-million-dollar investment that they made. And they didn't talk to a salesperson. Well, you don't hear that as much anymore, but also, you were buying something that was core to your tech stack. You knew you had all the knowledge that was in there. So you had the necessary expertise, meaning that the seller is not creating any value. There's nothing that the seller is bringing or that the seller's company is bringing that is being perceived as valuable.
Yep.
Now, there's a second reason too, and that is there's some stuff that people just don't value. And a lot of times they don't value it because they lack knowledge, right? You can't value what you don't know. But if you don't value it, then you don't value it. I can't make you value something that you don't value. At least like that's more of a marketer's problem. That gets into our strategy conversation about where are you in that segment. So a transaction, there are some things that we know to be transactions. And you know what, Jess? You know what the best thing I can do? And I actually did I ever tell you about my first experience as a salesperson, my first live sales experience, like real legitimate.
Oh, yeah.
Salesperson selling.
Yeah. Person answered the phone, you hung up, right?
No. That was someone that I was coaching.
Oh,
when I was
never mind.
Person. So I worked at this furniture, audio, visual, like it had every, we sold washers, dryers, stereo equipment, furniture, etc. Person came in the night before, their television crapped out. They needed a new television.
Okay.
Right. And now I had done all the sales training. I'd read my stuff, etc.
Yep.
Asked them qualifying questions. What do you like to watch? Tell me about your current television. If you had a magic wand, what would you be like? Showed them these televisions. It was beautiful. We looked at it. And here's how the conversation ended. Doug, this was really, really helpful. Thanks. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Yep. My first professional sales experience, I was unable to sell a television to somebody whose television broke and he wanted a television so he could watch television that night.
So no, I don't think you've ever told me this before. That
was my honest to God first professional sales experience. What should I have done?
Sold him a television.
Sold him the damn television. Right? Sometimes, like if I want something, make it easy for me to buy.
Yeah.
So when you look at a transaction, like in a transaction, the objective and the purpose here, what you want to do with a transaction as an organization, you want to streamline the process, right? Because here's the thing, transaction is geared to fundamental value. It's a fundamental value purchase. And if I'm in a fundamental value place, cost is the driver.
Yeah.
Minimize cost. Cost. Does that mean that you have to be the lowest price all the time? Again, cost is more than price, but it's lower the cost. And by the way, if you're not continually lowering the cost, you're going to have troubles. Now, here's something to understand. What was once strategic becomes transactional. I mean, it used to take, companies would spend a year to buy a terabyte of data storage.
Right.
Now they go to Staples.
Right. Yeah.
Right now they just take it out of their pocket.
Right.
My daughter comes home from college one year and she's got like 4 terabyte external hard drives that she's got with her I'm like, what? And
Yeah.
She's walking around the airport with 4 terabytes of storage. So you like, this is low to very low, and you want to be in low to very low value creation mode. By the way, you know what happens when you treat a transaction opportunity with a strategic mindset, all with the intent to help? It's like teaching a pig how to sing. That's what my dad used to say. At the end of the day, it doesn't work and you annoy the pig.
Yep.
Right? When I start trying to Oh, well, oh, you're looking for this. Well, did you know that blah, 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 blah. And here's what, and by the way, I used to make this mistake all the time. You'd come in because like, this is my big mistake as a financial advisor early on. You attended a seminar, you fit my profile, and you reach out to me. You're like, yeah, I was looking to invest some money in a mutual fund. I really enjoyed your program. Thought I'd open an account with you. Oh, this could be a big account. I don't want to just give them like $20,000 in mutual fund. This could be $1 million under assets under management. And I'd get caught. They weren't ready to talk about that.
Yep.
But I didn't just give them this. And so I got caught in between.
Right.
When you've got a transactional element as a business, you want to streamline it and you want to reduce your costs. The way you win the transaction game is when you can sell something at a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're making money at a price point where your competitors are losing money. Now, for the most part, if you're in the mid-market space, you're not going to be able to get there. You're not going to be able to have that advantage on an Amazon or a Walmart. But what you do need to do is make sure that you're minimizing and mitigating those costs and more importantly, your scarce resources.
Right.
So that's why a transaction pipeline is important. Make sense?
Yep.
What did I miss?
I mean, so I get why the transaction pipeline. So what are the considerations? What are the things you should think about as you're putting that pipeline together?
So here's what typically comprises your transaction pipeline. And to some degree, what you can do is you can say, well, if it doesn't meet the definitions of strategic, then we'll classify it as transaction. But a transaction pipeline, there's defined demand. Now, here's the thing. We have a super, super simple transaction pipeline. And for a while we didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are. Here I'm saying every company should have 3 pipelines, and we didn't have it. The reason was when I go through these explanations, you're going to see that we didn't have any like that. That wasn't where we played.
Right.
So we didn't exist. Like we weren't fighting in markets where the demand was defined. And so we were catching the demand.
Yep.
It's fundamental value. These markets are highly competitive, or there's no competition. Like they're extreme markets.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's nowhere else to buy from it. You need it or you don't need it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, if you're a construction business after a hurricane, after Category 5 hurricane, it's a transaction.
Right.
Reducing friction is all friction is bad.
Yep.
All friction is bad. You're dealing with very high intent market,
mm-hmm.
and you're a strong player to the leader.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, don't treat a market where you're the new entrant and there's a strong incumbent and treat it as a transaction. That might not be a good place to go. Very low to moderate value or impact that you provide or that a seller can provide. It's relatively high volume. And the process is straightforward. And by the way, it should be straightforward because if the intent is there,
mm-hmm.
then moving forward. By the way, the other thing too is it tends to have a lower value on the organization. So like this is not where we're making our money. It's profitable, but it's not our core business. I always kind of say like there's the people that I'll sell to, and then there's the people that I'm happy to let buy.
Right.
The people that I'm happy to let buy, they're going to come into, they're going to be transactions. So in other words, I'm not going to jump through 17 hoops for somebody and things like that. So it's a very simple, straightforward. And by the way, your ultimate aim here, and you might not be able to achieve it, and a lot of people aren't going to like me when I say it. Your ultimate aim here should be, how can we make this self-serve?
Mm-hmm.
How can we make this self-checkout?
Yeah.
Every time a person has to touch this, it's either bad for you because it creates a cost and uses a scarce resource.
Yep.
Bad for the customer because it makes it harder to buy, or bad for both.
Yep. And so because of it needing to be, because it's higher volume, because it's a more straightforward sale, and because the friction needs to be reduced, it's usually fewer stages, right? Or it is fewer stages.
Yeah, it's fewer stages. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, if my objective is to
mm-hmm.
minimize touch, is to minimize friction,
mm-hmm.
I'm singing a different song. It's got a different
Right.
rhythm. It's a different motion. And so what I'm looking for, going from sales led to self-serve, that's not a one-step process. That's without losing the entire reason that people buy from you.
Right.
And so to be able to close the loop, to get the signal to move towards that, that's why it needs to be separated.
Yep.
Now, why do you want to reduce the dependence on salespeople? Well, one could be, why have costs if I don't need costs? But
Right.
here's the bigger reason. Because I am all in for salespeople. This is not a reduced sales headcount show today.
Yeah.
Because we need them, and we don't have enough of them for our strategic opportunities.
Right.
They're spending too much time on lower value transactional opportunities that we're not playing our game. We're not implementing our strategy to win our core markets, right? So a strategic pipeline, that's a high impact for us and for them, high value creation, differentiation. So if you're playing differentiation, if differentiation matters here, then you need a strategic pipeline. What's interesting is I might win my business. I might win the account strategically, but that doesn't mean, and we have our clients that they buy strategically. That's how we win our customers. But then they, as we now have some products that are much more transactional, there are multiple transactional opportunities, or there's programmatic buying. That's another way that allows us to really differentiate. And so that strategic market, you've got more discretionary demand, right? It's more, it is total value. The market has varied intent. There's education, and what I would say value education that's needed, right? Now, here's the thing. If you don't find value in it as the customer, and I say, well, you should understand that we're better than who you're using. I need to bring value education, but you're not going to attend a class. You're not going to get educated on something you don't want to get educated. So I need to make sure, if that's the issue that I have and it's a transaction, the way that I'm going to win you is by connecting to a higher value piece. By the way, one of the things and this is crazy. By the way, anyone that's selling a master services agreement, a hunting license, if you will, that is a strategic sale, followed by a number of sometimes strategic, but oftentimes transactional sales. And the reason that it never quite connects, they win the master services agreement, but they don't get the revenue from that they should, is because they didn't treat it fully strategically enough to enable the next steps, or the implementation takes on too much burden for that. So again, the considerations are higher impact. So you're typically looking at larger average sale value. Profit matters. So this is, you're looking to win quality sales. You want to maintain your margins. You probably want to improve your margins. It's a total value. And your volume is going to be lower to moderate. So if you're in a higher volume market, it's going to be transactional. I don't know that you can be in a truly high volume strategic market. Those two, there might be an exception to that. So when you're looking at it, what is your core business? What are the things that connect to your value proposition? What are the elements? And again, remember, I might win one strategic sale. That strategic sale may create value, may create revenue. It may create no revenue. And maybe my strategic sale is what unlocks 1,000 transactional sales over the course of the lifetime, right? But if I'm making transactional sale, you'll never have customer lock-in. You just won't. You just won't. And so as you look at that, those are the big chunks that enable you to separate strategic versus transactional. And now you have three distinct motions. What am I doing in the middle? What am I doing to develop? What am I doing to connect to intent? Transactional. There's that motion, and I can optimize that, and I can run different plays. And, I might build we might build specialist teams over time. I tend to be a fan of actual sales teams that we've got transactional specialists and strategic specialists, and we'll save that for another episode. And then the strategic motion, and now I can run the right play in the right situation. it's kind of like, and I just thought about this. If you're growing a complex organization from a go-to-market standpoint, you're running a decathlon.
Yep.
Right. But here, like, I'm not going to do the shot put with the same strategy that I'm going to do the high jump.
Yeah.
And the challenge is for just about any company, once you get above 50 to 100, 150 salespeople, the challenge that you have is as you get to that size, you begin to expand typically the markets that you're in. And there's someone smaller that's more specialized. And that's part of the no man's land challenge that you have as you come into that new market, right? You used to have fewer people. Like today, you're larger, you've got better people, but it's harder to compete. And the reason is, well, even though they weren't as good, there were a couple key people and you were more specialist. You got to play to the advantage of small.
Yep.
You get to no man's land, you don't get to play to the advantage of small, and you don't get played to the advantage of big. So you've got to begin to create that separation so that you can apply, again, the right play to the right game at the right time in the right situation. And then get the right feedback to close the loop.
Yep. Oh man, I got a lot of takeaways. I'm going to try to winnow this down. So I think, the points around multiple pipelines get you in that right mindset for the motion required. And it isn't about fragmenting. It's about identifying those motions you need to take in a particular opportunity at a particular time. On the development pipeline, we hit on this all the time with clients that you need that development pipeline, whether you have a development function or not. And I've seen it at work with
a development team or not, just to be clear.
Development team.
Because you always have a development function.
Yeah, right. And I've seen that at work with one salesperson, and it does unlock quite a bit of capability. It puts you more in control. It gives you that clearer picture. It allows you to determine if you need to shift resources based on the market. And then, the what you hit on around strategic and transactions more straightforward, high intent, high volume. Strategics, that variable motion, you need to differentiate yourself more. And we implement this all the time. It works. And I agree with what you said around, we hear that I won't be able to explain it to reps. The reps won't understand. It's going to make it too difficult. You're making this too hard on the reps. Once you get it locked in, it actually does make them able to manage their days much, much better.
Yeah, it's very counterintuitive. And again, what you do is you build the profile. And by the way, this isn't a decision. Like, I don't have the rep, unless you want them to. The rep doesn't have to make the decision of which pipeline does this go into.
Yeah,
the profile of the deal.
Yeah,
determines that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of those things that it actually reduces the thinking and effort that's required, helps us break up our day better.
Yep. Everyone should have 3 pipelines. Do it now.
Are you ready for your vacation?
I am.
Well, on that note, we won't be recording next week because Jess is abandoning me in my moment of need.
He's so needy, folks. Until next time.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. If there's one thing out of every takeaway that there was from this episode, is that you should have 3 pipelines. Super simple, right? Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. Leave us a review and share the episode. We'd really appreciate it. If you have any questions you'd like to ask Doug or Jess about your pipeline or the structure of your pipelines, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, you can't solve your upstream problems downstream.